you can think will be always with you. Okay, Mangesh. Anything, call me. I don't want to disturb you, but I thought I'll just say hello. I just want to speak to you. Okay, Mangesh. Yeah. நான் இது வீடியோ இதுல வரலையா நம்ம இதுல வரல
இதுலனா வருது.
எப்ப கேட்டா எப்படி
பாக்குறீங்களா சார்?
என்ன இங்க எப்ப கேட்டாங்க இல்ல டாபிக்
illicit children, you do not know the actual date of birth, but we know where it was born. And the first report from India came in January. The profession of this is to kill people, infect people, and it has a close relative, pangolin co. But there are many other relatives of corona, which are SARS, MERS, you know about it. And the current address of the virus is in pneumocytes, type 2 pneumocytes, but it also has residence in many of the GI places. It has a barcode entry through a ACE2 inhibitor. It has a roaming address. It goes all over the world now. It has a contact number. It has a gene bank number. The reproduction time, like for TB, is very variable. Depends on the type of TB bacilli. For SARS, which is more than this, and for COVID could be between 2 to 2.5. The reproduction number will tell you how rapidly the virus will do and what is going to happen as far as infectivity is concerned. And why the name corona? It's like a crown. You can see like it's like a crown. Therefore, it is corona. The word comes because of all these coronations. And I'll come to it in a minute. These are the spikes. And when you look inside the virus, you have an Indian or you have one which is published from China. And it has a single-stranded RNA, which is a positive stranded RNA. It's about 3 times bigger than hepatitis C, which is about 9.6 kb, and 10 times then of hepatitis B, which is 3.2 kb. So it's a big genome. 30 kb is a very big genome compared to hepatitis B or hepatitis C. And when you look at its armory, what all does the virus have in its armory? You can see that it has a N protein, which is the nuclear. It has a matrix protein. It has an envelope protein. And of course, the most famous, the spike protein, because of which the name is there. And the spike protein is the one which is for binding. It can bind to the ACE2 receptor, or it will help in fusion to other proteins. So combination of these were initially tried for the detection of the virus, but they haven't. So now finally the RNA test has become the standard of care. And the entry mainly is through the ACE2, which is the key to this. Now, as I showed you, these are spike proteins, and these spike proteins will attach to the ACE2 receptor in the host cell plasma membrane, and then they will go inside. But there could be other probable endopeptidases, and these endopeptidases will also be through the protein, which is your spike protein, and you can block them. So the entry of the virus, I'll show you many other furines and others are involved into this. And this spike protein primarily is the one which will also make antibodies against it. And now there are 8 mutations instead of 6 into different subunits of the virus. So let's look at how the virus enters. As I told you, one is the ACE, but you have GRP78, furin, and many other co-receptors. And several target cells are there. One, type 2 pneumocytes, but it can also go into the esophagus, liver, about which we are concerned, ileum and colon. And you can see that in colon, ACE2 is expressed. Actually, it is more expressed, even more than in kidney. It is more expressed than even in heart. So the reason for us to show you this is colon and gallbladder have these receptors, and we will come to the relevance of this, and also in the oral cavity. Now, the clinical findings of SARS and these, there can be many. I'll not go into details. All of you know about it. But you can say that almost 2/3 to 4/5 of the people will have symptoms. Myalgia, cough, fever, they could be mild, but also loss of smell, anosmia, headache, diarrhea, and sometimes hemoptysis. And the routes of infection, nose, ear, eyes, and of course, there is a fear that not confirmed orophycal route. The pathological findings and x-rays, Dr. Rakesh will briefly tell you. I'll just show you some pictures. And lymphopenia is a major issue. And the incubation period can be 4 to 24 days. It varies on the types of the virus. The shedding, you are fully aware that it is shedding up to 20 days, and it sheds into non-survivors till death. It obviously means the virus persists in the colon or in the intestine. Are we good in testing? So if you take the nasal swab, you are likely to get a diagnosis in about 60%. In a sputum, it could be better, 75, but you have to get a proper sputum. And BAL, the bronchiolar, alveolar lavage, you can have up to 90%. Feces can be 25% or so. And comorbidities, sorry, some of the slides got jumbled up. Cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, diabetes, and age will make the problems more, not because these are more affected, but they have limited reserve, but we do not know. So I'm going to now pass on to Rakesh in a minute. I'll just tell you that this is a rogue virus. Rogue is, you know, a rogue virus. So it has now a globe-trotting habit from here to here to here to here. And already 8 large strains have been shown, and they have mutated, and therefore availability of a vaccine will be a challenge. You may or may not be able to have a very successful, like hepatitis C, just a 9.6 kb. So the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase of the hepatitis C and of the COVID-19 are both very potent to have mutations. So the drama is now playing out. And I welcome you to liver and GI manifestation. You can see this is the way the crown is going to be, and the show is on liver and GI manifestation. So over to our senior resident, who has done an amazing good job of a presentation. So Rakesh, you would like to come here? How will you show your presentation?
Sir, I'll just take a minute. मैं ये वहाँ पे download कर.
So I encourage all of you, if any one of you are you people seeing COVID patients? If anyone, please raise his hand. Are you looking after COVID patients? Please identify yourself. I can't. Doctor.
I am Dr. Natraj, sir. I am a general physician working in Government Tiruvallur Medical College Hospital, a designated hospital for COVID-19 patients. And we have nearly 18 patients now, COVID positive patients. We have 18 patients.
So tell us your experience first before we go on to tell you more.
Most
What
of the
has been
patients
your
still,
experience?
most of the patients till now identified are from the Delhi cluster, sir. Most of them, 18 patients. And most of them have very subtle symptoms like cough, and only one of them have fever, and rest of them are very healthy till now. But only because of the clusters they came to us for identification, and the RT-PCR was positive for them. We tested nearly 100 patients, out of which 18 patients came out positive. Till now they don't have any manifestations. Mild cough for 2-3 patients, and one patient had fever, temperature of 100 degrees. That's all. Rest of them are all well.
What are
They don't have any
liver enzymes? Liver
enzymes which you have tested for nearly 10 patients have come, but it is not elevated, sir. It is all SGOT, SGPT is normal, sir. Normal. LFT is normal. RFT is normal. Till now.
There is a very recent study which has not become online, which I reviewed, is that patients who have got NASH, and maybe Dr. Rakesh will touch base on that, and I think that will tell us how we can get some studies also. Rakesh?
Fine, sir.
Good afternoon, all. The sir has briefly explained about the incidences and the pandemic of corona going on. It started from Wuhan and now spread to almost all the world. And I will cover the liver disease and COVID-19, and will discuss on the headings of pathogenesis at receptor level, possible mechanism at immune and cellular level, mechanisms of liver injury, treatment and disease related, and the liver enzyme abnormality in various studies, MAFLD, and the liver transplant scenarios, and the procedure guidelines given by ASLD, and the treatment summary and some special situations. Pathogenesis, the Chai et al. From China has found that the liver cells and the bile duct cells express AS2, as well as the enterocytes in ileum and colon was also found to have AS2 level at higher than the other places. So the ACE level expression of bile duct was much higher than the liver, and it was comparable to the alveolar type 2 cells in the lung. So it was thought of that the patient could have a GI route of spread as well. So that is still not confirmed and still not proved so far. But there are various theories behind this because of the high density of the receptors in the GI tract. And ACE2 expression is enriched in cholangiocytes. That also suggests that the cholestatic injuries can be more than hepatocellular injuries. That is proved in some studies, but the opposite was reported in some other studies. And binding efficiency of the COVID-19 is higher than the previously reported pandemics like MERS and SARS. Possible mechanism at the immune and cellular levels are there is impaired innate immunity manifested by deranged functional diversity of macrophages, where pro-inflammatory macrophages M1 increases and the anti-inflammatory macrophages, which are M2, are decreases. So and overproduction of T cells, there is increase in Th17, and the high cytotoxicity of CD8 T cells was found in some studies. And hepatic dysfunction with the COVID-19 was accompanied by greater activation of coagulative and fibrinolytic pathway, relative depressed platelet counts, increased neutrophil counts and neutrophil to lymphocytic ratio, and high ferritin level. And this unbalanced immunity favors coagulation activation and also alters the systemic iron metabolism and may lead to macrophage activation, and patient can have HLH or macrophage activation syndrome. That is not reported in anywhere, but the mechanism behind this is there. Liver involvement in the previous SARS associated viral hepatitis has been reported earlier in 2004, and at that time also it was considered that this virus is not hepatopathic. It is not directly toxic to liver, and although there are the derangement of the liver function in around 60% of the patients, and the main cause was found to be DILI, and because of the various drugs which are used to the treatment of these patients, and the most of these patients were very critical patients and ICU patients. And the similar is happening with the this COVID-19 also. The only postmortem liver biopsy report of the COVID-19 showed that the microvascular steatosis is common, and which is a similar finding to the sepsis. And taking together all these, it is unlikely to cause direct cytopathic damage, and because of the injury to the liver is mild, and there is no evidence of the late presentation is associated with the greater damage to the liver. And drug-induced liver injury similar to the other the prior pandemics, like with antibiotics, antiviral and steroids, or the lopinavir or ritonavir, the antivirals which are used in the critically ill patients in some other countries, can cause the DILI. And there is no reports of that this COVID-19 has lead to ACLF or acute decompensation of CLD. So it is likely it is not directly cytopathic to liver. And the GI symptoms, there is retrospective analysis of 1100 patients from a single hospital from China, where they have reported around 16% presented with GI symptom only. And out of them, 2/3 has nausea and vomiting at the presentation, and 37% has diarrhea, 25% has abdominal pain, and mild elevations of AST and elevation was found in the almost the most of the cases. Then another study of the 204 patients from China, and where they have presented with 50% reported with digestive symptoms along with the other symptoms also, which includes lack of appetite in 78% of patients, diarrhea in 34%, vomiting in 3.9%, and the abdominal pain in 1.9% of the patients. And they found that the digestive symptoms had significantly longer time from the onset to admission than the patient without digestive symptoms. And in 6 patients, they have found that the symptoms are only gastrointestinal, and there were no respiratory symptoms to present with to the hospital. And as the severity of the disease increases, digestive symptom became more pronounced. And the patient with digestive symptoms has higher mean liver enzymes level, low monocyte count, and prothrombin time, and patient received more antibacterial treatment than compared to the other patients. Another study of 651 patients, where 11% patient presented with GI symptoms, and of those 22% were having severe critical illness as compared to 8% without GI symptoms, and 31% had family clustering as compared to 20% without GI symptoms. So family clustering was more in patient with GI symptoms, and the critical illness is more with the patient who had GI symptoms. And of these, 39% has high grade fever, 31% has fatigue, and 21% has headache. And on multivariate analysis, sputum production from infected area and increased LDH and increased glucose were found more associated with GI symptoms of the patients. And the liver enzyme abnormalities were found in the bilirubin was found to be raised in 10% of patients, AST was in 21% of patients, and ALT in 22% of patients. There is no case reports of ALF, and the liver manifestations are with the patients who are more aged, more severe illnesses, and had more comorbidity associated with them. There are the data of it ranges from 2 to 11% of patients have the liver comorbidities to start before the admission to the hospital, and 14 to 53% had abnormal AST and ALT during the progression of the disease. And the patient with severe COVID-19 seems to have higher rate of liver dysfunction. And a study, only single case report where the ischemic hepatitis were reported with, where AST of 7,000 and ALT of 1400, which is not a common scenario with the COVID-19 of the liver diseases. And these are the reports from the select region of the US, and reported 24 ICU patients, where they had found that the AST and ALT elevations was found in around 41% patients and 32% of patients of the ALT elevation, and the high lactate elevation also in 53% of the patients. To summarize, the incidence of liver injury can range from 14.8 to 53%, and death from the COVID-19 with liver injuries ranges to 58 to 78%, and abnormal AST and ALT levels were there, but it was in the mild, slightly elevated bilirubin level and slightly elevated AST and ALT level. Albumin was also found lower, 2.6 to 3 gram per deciliter, and both cholestatic and the hepatocellular pattern of the liver injury can be there. These are the sir has discussed about this NAFLD and COVID-19 patients, and they recently published where 50% of the patients had the liver dysfunction at the time of admission, and 50% do not had. And at the time of discharge, the patient who had the liver dysfunction, the 24% had normal liver functions, and the 6.4% had the normal dysfunction among those who had the liver dysfunction during the hospitalization. And by looking at the multivariate analysis of these, the male sex, age of more than 60 years, and the BMI and comorbidities and NAFLD was found to have the high rate of progression and severe illness with associated with the COVID-19 patients in the NAFLD patients. And also there is a high risk of progression, 6.6% versus 44.7%, and longer viral shedding time in the NAFLD patients as compared to those who had without NAFLD, and high likelihood of liver function at the time of discharge in the NAFLD as compared to the non-NAFLD population, and the longer viral shedding as 17 days as compared to 12 days in the NAFLD population as compared to non-NAFLD population. So we can conclude that because of obesity and fatty acids, there is the derangements of the immunity, and because of that, inflammation promoting M1 macrophages increases and inflammation suppressing M2 macrophages decreases. And because the liver is the major immune organ of the body, and the macrophages are there, the largest number of macrophages in the liver, so TNF alpha and the other cells can be there. There are case reports from the liver transplant recipients also that they have reported a liver transplant recipient who was symptomatic at the time of the admission before the transplant, but his testing was not done. The COVID-19 was not suspected, but after transplant and immunosuppression, the fever continues. So the COVID-19 testing was done and found to have positive for the COVID-19. And later on, after around 60 day, on the 60-day post-op, he become COVID negative. So we should be aware of this. Though at present the guidelines suggesting that the elective surgeries, elective liver transplantations are not to be done, but if patient is in dying state and it is life-saving for the patient, then some exceptional rule can be implemented. So we should be aware of the protocol, screening protocol of the donor and the recipient both, and we should be aware that in this COVID pandemic time, ASLD has recommended his recommendations about the procedures. There is a potential for the fecal-oral transmission, and the virus is detected in saliva, virus is detected in the stool in around 50% of the serious cases, and endoscopic procedure should be considered as the aerosol generating, and performing these procedures, PPE should be gloves, gowns and IVRs and headwear should be worn, and the non-elective procedure should be cancelled, and patient may require some procedure can be done there for liver biopsy to rule out rejection or to rule out the autoimmune hepatitis, therapeutic paracentesis tips, and the endoscopic procedures for cholangitis or like ERCP, and the bleeder patients who are requiring band ligation. But This PPE should be worn in all cases, and the hats may be worn for the entire day, and the IVR should be cleaned with a alcohol wipe between the cases, and disposable IVR should be disposed at the end of the day unless visibly soiled, and in the cases it should be immediately discarded if it is soiled. And we should clean the surfaces, and disinfection of the room should be done as per the CDC recommendations. And the patient who are receiving immunomodulatory drugs, the decision to discontinue prednisolone, biologicals and other immunosuppressive drugs in the setting of the infection must be determined on the case-to-case basis, and there is no evidence routinely to discontinue the treatment, because if we discontinue the treatment, then there may be loss of response when the drug is reintroduced, and there is risk of flare of the disease also. And in the treatment, we all know the precautions of the droplet and airborne aerosolization procedures, PPE, hand hygiene, and standard contact precautions that should be done.